way selling that arm now because of what happened, Buddy Rogers.
If I go back to the other point you made earlier about how this kind of reminded you a little bit of the Cruiserweight Classic, like when I was watching like the finals of that, I was thinking that I could have gladly watched for close to an hour.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That was the kind of thing that held my attention.
Yeah, I think on a smaller scale, I think you could do this type of stuff. I honestly do. I just don't know if it would work in WWE. But the WWE is its own thing. But I think if I was like, say for instance, when people talk about, I love that there, whoa, huge shoulder tackle straight through, no messing about there, was it? This is probably our first time we've actually seen these two guys out the outside of the ring as well. Love that there. But yeah, if you imagine, if you was a smaller promotion like a TNA, and you think, oh well, what could my promotion do to be so different from everything else? This sort of thing would certainly be one of them. And you look at most of those wrestlers that competed in the Cruiserweight Classic, they could all pretty much pull that off to some extent. So you definitely could do it. It's just, are you going to be able to do it across the whole board? But you'd certainly have your own thing going on if you did. It would certainly be different to anything else that we see today. So this is like, what I'm enjoying about this, what is the fact of how fast they're going at this stage of the match. But this is how you were taught back then, is how to work a match. Is that you get everybody so excited by the countdown. Like people now would be thinking, crikey, is he going to get this back? Like there's a real story to this. So they've done very well with the pacing of the match, because sometimes you watch a lot of the pacing of the matches today are done really incorrectly. The way they do them, like they're very fast at the beginning, then you get a very stale part and no real reason for anything, and everybody then waits just for the signature move to start happening, and only then people start to see it's going to be over soon. But back here, this is a time again where finishing moves, things like that, they weren't really a part of the game here. Like Thez did have finishes and things like that, but not to the level where it's always going to be used. Because sometimes you just couldn't do it. Whoa, that's a huge chain, massive powerbomb, and then a kick out of it. It's literally like non-stop so far. Like, these guys are just giving it all here.
I really like the way now it's like sort of kicked it up a gear, and now they're getting a lot more high impact.
Yeah. It's so much. It just reminds me so much of because obviously back here mixed martial arts was never a thing, and but what we see now, Matt, when you think this was supposed to be real, this has got to be the closest. When you watch mixed martial arts, this has got to be the closest we see on a wrestling side to looking real that I've actually seen. Even from the 60s, I don't think the 60s started to phase a lot of this out. But this is probably the closest I've seen where we're watching chain wrestling. Okay, they might not be hitting each other, like when you watch UFC and those guys hit each other, there's impact. But I think as far as like if you're watching Olympic style wrestling or Roman Greco, this would be it. You would definitely be sort of like, this has to be the closest to it. Buddy Rogers every time just waits for him to walk in. So that's the takedown. In your opinion, Matt, both these guys should probably be Hall of Famers?
Oh yeah, completely. Like I said at the beginning of the thing, even without seeing too much of them wrestle, you know instinctively who these people are. Just by like the references other wrestlers have made to them, and by like the actual the Thez press, like is his iconic move, and to have that named after you, and it's utilised so often now. Austin and now Randy Orton uses it quite often.
Cool, yeah.
So yeah, it definitely just they're a household name in wrestling.
I thought that Buddy Rogers had been inducted to the WWF considering he'd worked there, but I'm actually finding... Oh, he was. He is actually a member. He was inducted in 1994, so he's definitely in there. But Lou Thez is not, which I'm shocked about. Now, I know he wasn't WWE, so I wouldn't have expected him to put him in at the same time they did Buddy Rogers. But since then, we've seen guys that haven't participated in WWF, like the Japanese stars that have come over. So I'm thinking to myself, why is Lou Thez not in there? Like, it just makes no sense to a guy who's done so much. He's got to be like the most like reputable like old wrestler that will first come around, the most viewed person in all of America, but he's not in there. Sometimes it's all political. Sometimes, like, I know he didn't ever have much to say good about Hulk Hogan and stuff like that, saying that he wouldn't know the difference between a wrist lock and a wrist watch, things like that, if he was to wrestle him. But come on, I've seen guys going for far less than stuff like that, I'll be honest. So
there's even a celebrity section now, so come on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're spot on there as well. I love that he didn't go and pounce back on him, because it just makes sense that, like, why would you? I always think that in matches, like, why did he do that when he knew he didn't even have to? Here we go back to that sort of Kimura lock that he's just put back in there. It kind of reminds me of how Sasha Banks kind of does her stuff, if you watch how she rolls through and puts her submission on. I've got to say, I don't, you know, you think wrestlers today would look at this and go, do you know what, I might actually use this as my finisher, like what I'm seeing in this sort of stuff, because it kind of still looks good. Like, if I would believe this, if it was on today, without a doubt, if somebody tried to put this move in.
Yeah, it looks nasty, doesn't it?
I've got to say, the quality of the video is fine. Like, I was expecting there'd be a few more cranks and problems in it, but it's very good quality. So hopefully you guys are seeing what we're seeing as well, and it's been pretty decent quality for 1951.
Yeah, I was surprised about that.
Sometimes it's always hard to look at black and white stuff and to imagine. You know, you think back to then and you think, oh, everything was black and white. Well, of course it wasn't. There was colour, but the TVs, you know, just you can't get that real feel for what it would have been like, unfortunately, without the colour. But it's just one of those things. So whenever you think of this wrestling, you just think of black and white, and it's just got that old thing to it before you even start watching it. But I think you can really, you know, if hopefully most of the listeners have seen this as well, is that the more I've been watching this, the more I'm accepting of it I am, and I'm not really too bothered that it's black and white. It's kind of secondary to me now, because you can literally see everything that's going on. It's definitely not hurting what these guys are performing at the moment. It looks like he's literally just like actually knackered out on top of him then.
He did like a collapse on there. You didn't even realise that his foot was out of the room.
Another like good little headlock there. Oh, we go, Lou Thez press. I was waiting for that. Thinking, when will it come? So he's gonna sell his head there, like he probably like gone into with his head. A gridiron. It's odd that like he literally lays on him, but the referee's kind of refusing to count it. It's like, no, it's not a proper roll up. You're not getting that. I think at least when they're doing punches, they're kind of making it very impactful. Like, they're not doing it where it's just like loads of punches and you think, like, why is that guy's head not going to hurt him now for the rest of the match? So that is there. I think that's the end of the match there. I'm guessing we may have missed a pinfall, because this officially, what I'm reading here is that this was a draw to some extent. Now, either there was a pin and maybe he had to get like two falls to win the title. I'm guessing that's what it was, but it went down as a draw overall. So hopefully, I love that, the end. It's like an old classic film there, wasn't it? No messing about there. Yeah, so hopefully people will email me in and tell me what was going on. Either we missed something, or there was. I think there was only one pin, from what I could see.
The other thing is, like, listening to it with no sound, you miss out on bits like
Yeah. We should reiterate that we had no sound when we was watching it. So you guys, if you literally watched it along, you hopefully stick a little bit of volume and go back on it or something, and you'll see what the initial announcement is. But I know the match was built as a 2 out of 3 falls match, so either he had to have the 2 falls to actually get the title, or otherwise it would just be considered a draw. But you know, I like. I've got to say, I'm surprised. I actually did enjoy it, and I'm glad that Sean picked that match, because I was a little bit worried when he said that from 1951. Summing up that match, Matt, how good was it? And to obviously us that don't normally watch wrestling back in this time, what did you take from it?
Well, I went in a little bit hesitant. You know, I was thinking, like, okay, it's quite old. I was like, how good will this be? But I'm actually pleasantly surprised, because it actually does hold its own. You know, and I think, like, especially for that kind of time zone, I was expecting, you know, to not be blown away. But although, like, it's a lot slower, it actually all makes sense, and I don't mind, like, going back and watching matches like that, because it was quite interesting to see the difference in the styles and everything. And it's quite funny what you said now, because, like, YouTube's still on my thing now, and now that Gorgeous George is coming out now.
Yeah, I just noticed that was the next thing. Yeah, I mean, probably it'll probably get the same video come out if people have been watching it as well. If you look what's been loaded up next, but I think it's titled as The Glory Days of Wrestling Disc 1 or something like that, and Gorgeous George versus Jesse James has come up on that screen. Now, he was a very outrageous character. When you look at him, Matt, like, he's probably got to be 1 in a million back then, and I can't imagine what society would have thought of this at the time.
He really got people annoyed, didn't he?
Yeah. He's done a lot of that.
From that, yeah.
Certainly, I mean, he would have been a blueprint for a lot of the character wrestlers that came along later, you know, that showmanship. This would have been the blueprint for that. Like, he would have paved the way for a lot of wrestlers to do this. So maybe you weren't as good as you could be in the ring, but I mean, you have this type of persona, you're going to get over another way. And listen, even today, that still goes on, like, in a massive way. Like, people don't just get over in the ring. In fact, very few people get over in the ring these days, Matt, as we've seen. It's all about other stuff. So this would have definitely been a blueprint, even back here, back then, to see this type of stuff. Going back to the Lou Thesz Buddy Rogers match, yes, like I said, very, very impressed. Glad I saw it. I knew these guys had wrestled twice before this, and this was the third time he challenged for that NWA title. But, you know, Buddy Rogers, I've got to say, I've got to give it to both guys. I wasn't as familiar with Buddy Rogers as I am Lou Thesz, but Buddy Rogers looked really good. I think both wrestlers looked so sound. Like, you couldn't... Very hard to tell who was better. I think technically I would say give it to Lou Thesz, just because some of those submissions look so good. Like, you know, I don't think I watched any botches going on in that match. I think it was all very, and if there was, they'd done a very good job at not showing it. Like, I think that was probably the art of back then. You never sort of showed it to the way you do now. So yeah, I mean, if this was today and we was ranking this would be a solid 5 stars. You know, and it is, you know, I know people will say, hey, you can't mark it to today and all the rest of it, and it was different, but honestly, even if I was back then, what could you say was wrong with that match, really, other than maybe the way it ended? I mean, it was fine, no problems. So I would give that a solid 5, no problems. What would you give that match, Matt? I know it is a completely different era, completely different generation, and there should be no comparisons to what goes on today, because guys don't get to work that style. It's a completely different thing. But just on your viewing, Matt, what would you say that match would have been for you?
Well, yeah, there was no mistakes here, like you say, and you know, Buddy did a great job of coming across as the bad guy. So, and people wanted to pay their money to see Lou Thez. It was all about the anticipation. And they didn't let down. Like once they actually started the match, and they'd got their money. It wasn't just about that. It was also about putting on a great show. And I think it would definitely for me wouldn't have been any lower than a 4.5. And possibly Morphy probably was a 5. But it's hard to actually